Jennette McCurdy released her debut novel, Half His Age, in January 2026, but before that, there was a bit of drama.
In a book that has scenes involving period blood on faces and licking the hair on the protruding belly of a middle-aged man, the part I found most disturbing is when the main character is flossing and the food from her teeth flies and sticks to the mirror.
What we knew was that the book focused on a relationship between a schoolgirl and her English teacher, and that it had this bold, finger-sucking cover image. Not my favourite pick, sure, but I was excited to see Jennette's take on this nasty, greasy, uncomfortable topic. Others were not so excited. In the months before the novel's publication, commenters on Jennette's Instagram said, "Remember, if you support this book, you support pedophilia, and that is not okay," smiley face. Why are girls into older men? Very curious about your book. Can't wait to read. Personally, I only date in my age group. Just personal accountability. Do you wrote it in a graphic erotic adult only type way? My husband and I have a big age gap, so I'm looking forward to reading this book. What is it about? A romantic novel about a girl who dates an older man? Not quite. Is it about a man like myself, 57, falling in head over heels with someone like yourself, 33? There was a madness in the air, a mixture of hype and fear based on the imagined book existing solely in commenters' heads, a book that maybe would make a relationship between a teenager and an adult sexy. A very scary thought. Many TikTok commenters also had much to say. I mean, it's only natural that people that don't know this author or her work might react impulsively towards this description. IDK, because a lot of people who suffer abuse end up fetishizing it. It depends on how it's written. This book definitely has the intention of being a very personal story of what it feels like to be a girl in that position and how deeply traumatizing it is, but people aren't wrong to be afraid that it'll be yet another story that romanticizes being groomed by a teacher. Loved your first book. Admittedly, I'm hesitant to read because I'm hoping it doesn't glorify these types of traumatic relationships. Thinking face. So sure, it makes sense to have an immediate emotional reaction to learning that this book is about a student-teacher affair, and to not want to read the book at all based on that information. But these comments are not thoughts inside people's minds, they're typed-out expressions of distaste and concern that reflect a wider tendency to decide in advance. Obviously, there's a huge audience for reviews and impressions of media that the viewer hasn't yet engaged with themselves. We love talking and hearing about things, soaking in the takes, and enjoying the sometimes cherry-picked worst elements of a thing. You know, like when people say that Final Fantasy VIII's junction system is bad. No, it isn't. While some of you are no doubt watching this video after having read Half His Age and are filtering it through your own yummy perspective of the book, many of you won't have, and it's you who are my special minions who will repeat my ideas verbatim to your friends and family when they inevitably ask you, "Hey, did you think Jennette McCurdy's novel was slay or nay?" Guys, it was slay. I myself love reading reviews of books I haven't read and thinking, yeah, this one probably sucks. That's one of life's sweet joys. But the sheer popularity of this kind of speculative water cooler noodling leads to the unbridled proliferation of a lot of false assumption, and a lot of needless, misinformed, ballooning outrage. It's happened before, it'll happen again, baby. That's the circle of life. That's what The Lion King was really all about. And of course, this will come most easily when it's attached to taboo or uncomfortable topics, like when Elizabeth Gilbert detailed her own drug-addled plan to kill her terminally ill girlfriend in her admittedly very crazed book All the Way to the River.
Elizabeth, honey child, what you been doing in there?
There are a million scandalized one-sentence Goodreads reviews, and while I understand completely being shocked and upset that Liz would admit to actively planning to kill, and while I do in fact think the book is quite horrible, this one admission is not quite what it seems. I don't think All the Way to the River is bad because its author includes a kind of damning reveal of one of the lowest points of her life, being, as she says, driven to homicidal thoughts via a systematic period of abuse and sleep deprivation and heavy drug use orchestrated by the person she then wanted to kill. I'm not talking here about a mercy killing or euthanasia or helping someone who is in great suffering to have a death with dignity. Rhea, at that point, most certainly did not want to die, and she knows no longer gave a shit about her dignity. All she wanted to do was consume as much cocaine, alcohol, prescription drugs, and cigarettes as she could get her hands on, to monologue about how amazing and powerful she was for defying all the doctor's prognoses about her expiration date, to doze off while smoking cigarettes in bed until the sheets and pillowcases smoldered from her dropped embers, to pick hallucinated worms and bugs off her hot, itching skin, and to tell me what a total fucking failure I was as a human being for not taking better care of her. And because she would not sleep, I could not sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, she shook me awake and demanded that I pay attention to her, or bring her something she needed, or listen to speeches about how great she was and how terrible I was. And I don't think it's bad because she details numerous insane and abusive things she did in her life. Like, I'm not saying it was good that she wanted to kill her girlfriend, but she didn't actually, do it. I think it's bad because of the way she uncritically and earnestly presents her psychotic hallucinations about God and dead loved ones talking to her as fact. How do I know this was the voice of God? Because I know the voice of God. I know the voice of God the way a blind, mewling, newborn kitten knows the smell of its mother. I think it's bad because she dismisses her abusive behavior towards others as in service of a heavenly hub world that she calls Earth School, that she's convinced is real and perpetually reincarnating her and everyone else, so that she can have every possible human experience and attach it metaphysically to her soul. It's a hallucination of the secret inner workings of the world that means that she sort of isn't responsible for her actions. It's God's plan, so they kind of don't matter. God said this plan involved me being nasty to you.
But I open up my notebook and I write these words, "Dear God, what would you have me know today?" And then I download from my higher power what I need for the day.
I think it's bad because it's about a woman who died, and Liz starts off with a story about how that dead woman spoke to her from the beyond and told her it was okay to make her look really bad in the book. But now, on the morning of my 54th birthday, suddenly she was here. I mean, really here. The room was humming with big Rhea energy, and I felt chills up my entire body. I started laughing and crying at the same time. "Baby," I said, "you've come to see me." I wanted to celebrate, but I could sense there was something she wanted to tell me, something that demanded my fullest attention. As for the book, just write the living shit out of that thing. Tell the people exactly what happened. Tell them every single thing that happened. Don't worry about protecting my dignity or yours. Just go full punk rock with it. Lay it all out there. What use do I have for dignity now? You don't need dignity either, so fuck it. It's time for you to write a completely honest book about addiction, yours and mine. It'll help some people, so don't hold back. I like the title All the Way to the River, but what do I know? I'm dead.
I don't need dignity.
She goes, I'm dead. I don't need dignity.
Yeah. It's incredible. The attempted murder is small fry stuff. She's crazy. I can't fault people for being hypnotized by the salacious details they hear on the grapevine, but in both cases, the real meat of the book is a lot more complex than its most frightening images, and it's worth exploring why they're there and what they convey in context. Gross. The Goodreads view. Fortunately, now that Half His Age is no longer a hypothetical book, we can assess it based on its actual contents, and the Goodreads users have done just that. A reader named Anne said, "It feels raw. Not raw in a way that feels real, but raw in a way that stinks, and I feel offended." The book opens with a sex scene involving 17-year-old Waldo and her choppy, intrusive inner monologue. It isn't the presence of sex itself that disturbed me, but our main character's voice. Waldo's narration feels deliberately engineered to shock and unsettle the reader, to provoke discomfort rather than insight. I find it interesting that the aim of making the reader uncomfortable is positioned as an opposite to insight here. Are those things mutually exclusive? Much is made of the concept of shock for the sake of it in media. The gratuitous nature of sex scenes in movies has long been a critical sticking point and an often complex discussion, given that sex is at once a neutral part of life and a visual and narrative shorthand used to convey and explore anything from tenderness and vulnerability to degradation and misogyny. You can easily get the sense, looking at cinema as a whole, that gratuitous sex scenes are everywhere, included not for clear thematic or narrative reasons as much as to titillate the straight male viewer and to generally create an atmosphere of seeing women as more object than human.
Next time you go to the movies, just ask yourself these few questions. Are there 2 or more women in it, and do they have names? Do they talk to each other? And do they talk to each other about something other than a man?
How stories treat sex is a thorny and often uncomfortable topic. Sex is nasty. I said it.
Yeah!
And Jennette is so keenly aware of that sense of discomfort in this book, and the need for that discomfort to become a tool that forces its audience to reckon with the ugliness of desire, the misdirected freakishness of young passion.
It sounds bad, but I think it was a very good thing that I got pushback from my editor. I felt like he wanted me to write sex in a more flowery way, and ultimately I just could not, because that's not how this young woman views sex. It's not how I view sex. It's not how really anybody I know views sex.
In the book's opening scene, Waldo describes her own discomfort during a disappointing sexual interaction. His cunnilingus technique is underwhelming, she says of some boy who will shortly be discarded. Eyes shut reverently, occasional mms, slimy tongue that loop-de-loops over and over like a carnival ride, mechanical and passionless.
You know what? I say, why don't you just come up here? You don't want me to keep going? He asks, cocking his head. No, let's just get to it.
This is an introduction to her voice, dripping with disdain and frustration. The sexual frankness here is a mark of how absent she is in the experience of her own life. She describes the mop of hair I found so intriguing, so seductive, and that I now just find greasy. These are the first moments of the book, and we immediately foreshadow the rapid, listless transition Waldo will make from hot pursuit of a dazzling, forbidden relationship to the crushing, dull reality of it. This sort of discomfort, though, is not the book's most shocking. We are somewhat eased in here by this introduction to Waldo's own sense of the pathetic and lame. There's something unsettling here. Waldo describes the boy mashing and squishing her breasts between his fingers like a kid with a ball of Play-Doh, and it feels unpleasant and sad. Right away we feel the looming presence of a sort of sexual spectre. Waldo's need to feel something and her lack of ability to muster anything but cold dissatisfaction is interesting. Or is it? Another reviewer, Leah, says the sex scenes and explicit language are also haphazardly thrown in for shock value, not really serving much purpose besides that. And a second, Autumn, says most of it read like a terrible porno that was trying really hard to be relatable. Some moments I was interested, but most of it I was cringing, especially the scene with her period blood all over his face and her asking him to hit her face with his bloody dick. She includes a few quotes for us. I fantasize that I lift his shirt and touch his paunch. Watch it jiggle. Study the curly hairs on his belly and lick them straight. I fantasize that I crouch down under his desk and unbuckle his pants, then reach into his boxers and cup his wrinkly balls. This reader couldn't connect to these expressions of desire for these sort of ugly, authentic things about her teacher's body. She didn't like the wrinkly balls mention, and that's okay. Some of us are ball haters, and I respect that. But I find these lines really interesting. They express Waldo's yearning for intimacy, for a relationship that, yes, reaches the heights of sexual pleasure, but that also revels in the details of the body that are not as sexy, that wouldn't be special to her if not infused with that insane passion. Throughout the book, she contrasts the young bodies of her age-appropriate partners with the more complicated, seasoned, and in a way exotic body of 40-year-old Mr. Corgi. Her pursuit of him and these expressions of love for his wrinkly balls and little fat belly and so on are reflective of how deeply she feels her desire and love for the unremarkable ins and outs of this man, and through them, how much she craves an exit from the empty and predictable and clean-ish aspects of her life. The balls are important. You don't get it. You don't get the balls. But I do. I love these details as a way to explore the heightened madness of her feelings about Corgi and the misguided, desperate wants that lead her into an inevitably powerless and destructive relationship. As for the period blood scene, well, let's read some of it for a sec, shall we? Waldo and Mr. Corgi are having oral sex in the latter's house while Waldo is on her period, and this crazy cunnilingus moment is contrasted with the unsatisfying one that opened the book. He smiles, blood smeared on his lips and cheeks like he's having the best meal of his life. It's not a creepy gesture, something out of a slasher film. It's something deeper, more substantial. It's evidence that I can cling to in my moments of doubt, that this is how much he wants me. That he wants even my gross parts. Then things escalate and she asks him to slap her face with his penis. And so he does. It makes a soft smacking sound when it meets my cheek and the blood splatters onto my eyelids and forehead. Do it again, I say. So he does. Again, I say. So he does. There's something deep in me that wants this, to be slapped by a dick covered in my own blood. I want the small smack of pain, the flick of the blood drops, and the smell of metal. It's disgusting, but it's what I want. I don't want poems, quivering hands, longing looks, picnic blankets and gerbera daisies and dimly lit dinners. I want so much more, something truer, uglier. I want to go to a shared place, shameless and foul enough that we can't turn back, that we're somehow united in it, that my mark on him is indelible. If you were wondering about the pronunciation of gerbera, by the way, it's a classic case of completely different sounds for me and for thee.
Gerbera, 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 Gerbera.
This experience is dirty and exciting, and it's pleasurable precisely because it is ugly. Waldo feels accepted and loved in this moment. There's no pressure to hide or sanitize her body. Sex with Mr. Corgi as a mature man means accessing a real desire for Waldo that she has been unable to locate anywhere else. But this dramatic sense of satisfaction cannot last. Gwen, Mr. Corgi's wife, returns home unexpectedly, and so Waldo, hiding in the closet, is confronted by the reality. And in this, the kind of visceral unpleasantness of the period is used as a sort of allegory for the mess of life. The mess of life. The mess of the vagina. The mess of life. The pulse of an oncoming gush of blood swooshes through my uterus, then through my cervix. I cut my hand underneath as the blood oozes out, gelatinous clumps and mucousy, goopy strings of it. I try to contain the slimy flow in my hand, but it slides through my fingertips and onto the carpet underneath me. Another chunk of blood pulses out of my vagina and dumps into my hand as I watch the man I love be seduced by his wife. "Baby, please. My mind's just in work right now," he says. Hurt flashes in her eyes, and for a moment I feel like I've won, until the sleeve of a wool turtleneck brushes my cheek and I remember I'm the one cupping my own period blood in her closet. Another chunk of blood surges, and as it does, so too does the evidence from just minutes ago. The evidence I swore I would cling to in moments of doubt. The proof of just how badly he wants me. Here I am in a moment of doubt, and suddenly the evidence seems thin, useless. Who cares that he wants my blood on him? That's not enough. It'll never be enough. The imagery is visceral and arresting and unpleasant, and this is off-putting enough to destroy the book for some, understandably. If you don't find something sympathetic within this frightening manifesto for Waldo's pursuit of the sexually grotesque as an analogue for being truly seen and wanted despite your nastiness, then it might make perfect sense to see the book as like a terrible porno. But that's an easy, reductive comment to make about sexual writing. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't see any value in that discomfort. Therefore, its lowest common denominator shock filth. It's there for no other reason than to piss me off. TikTok user Audrey Johnson, in contrast, had positive comments to make about this aspect of the book, saying,
"I don't read books that usually have a lot of sex in them, and the sex in this book didn't bother me, because it wasn't supposed to be erotic. You were supposed to be reading this going, oh my god."
And as much as I agree with her, the sexuality of the book is broadly more about exploring Waldo's gnawing desires and insecurities than it is about indulging in the pleasure of it. I think it's more complicated than that. There are passages in the book that do linger on the intoxicating sensual pleasure that Waldo seeks and experiences. While the relationship between her and Corgi is painted very clearly as pathetic and sad, and the sex itself often represents some cruelty or emotional disconnect, the story is concerned with the psychology and isolation that makes Waldo vulnerable. Rather than providing a prescriptive assessment of Corgi, who we know is a worthless dweeb, we focus on Waldo's inner turmoil and the way it lends itself to her exploitation. And her burning, crazed sexuality is a part of that, a reflection of her own honest innermost wishes, as much as the wider broken environment that leads her to Corgi. When they have their first sexual encounter, it's horrifying because he's her teacher, because they're at school, and you're acutely aware at all times of how wrong and vomitous it all is. But there's an earnestness to the scene that also gets across just how thrilling the experience is for both parties. It's uncomfortable, but it doesn't shy away from the raw excitement of the experience, and I appreciate that aspect of the story, that we can look into Waldo's head and see that she does want and like and seek out this horrible relationship, and that has no bearing on our moral assessment of it. It doesn't diminish the pain.
In this
physical relationship with Mr. Corgi. It's Waldo who makes the first move. Can you talk to me about that choice? Like, was that important to you, and if so, why?
It was so important to me that Waldo be very aggressive, very forward, very adamant, very bold. No matter what this girl does, no matter how she could throw herself at his feet. He's still 40, and he's still our teacher.
Jennette McCurdy has talked quite a bit about her exploration of emotions through sex in this book. In a video posted to her Instagram at the end of December 2025, she said,
"There can be so much anger underscoring sexual encounters, specifically at a young age, and there can be so much shame behind it. And I really, really wanted that to come through. You know, I wanted the aggression of sex to come through, how animalistic it can be."
Clearly, she wanted to write sex in a revealing way, to incorporate its ugliest and messiest parts, to reach into the contradictory innards and revel in the reality of it as a sometimes hideous bodily experience. In another TikTok posted by her publisher, Fourth Estate Books, she said that while she was writing the book, she had a lot of different feelings.
Anything you can think of. I laughed, I cried, I sobbed writing this book. I laughed hysterically. I was turned on many times. I was uncomfortable that I was turned on.
This simple statement speaks to a core theme of the book, that our discomfort with our own feelings is its own self-perpetuating, isolating force, and makes it clear that while yes, the sex is supposed to be discomforting to make the reader squirm, it also might be arousing, shocking, thrilling. And doesn't that tell us something? That there's a disconnect between our bodily sensations and desires and feelings and our mental ability to sort them that's worth examining? That there is something lost when we can't examine those sensorial contradictions? Some of the sex scenes in this book really make it so that you understand Waldo's attraction to Corgi on a visceral level. You can feel the rush of it all, the way it makes her feel special and unique and wanted. Part of the appeal is that it's wrong, and that's an ugly thing to grapple with, both for a society that needs spotless victims and for girls who can relate to Waldo's experience and don't totally know what to do with their shame about how their own desires played into it. Hannah, a Goodreads user with a cute Hello Kitty icon, said of the book, "I honestly don't understand what point the author was trying to make here, but whatever she was trying to say, she said it wrong. Both main characters, the victim and the predator, are portrayed terribly, and that makes this book not just bad, but dangerous." Let's start with Mr. Corgi, a 40-year-old creative writing teacher. I've read several books that deal with this topic, and usually child predators are portrayed as what they actually are. Terrifying, pathetic, yes, but also manipulative, calculating, abusive, and careful. They groom, create dependency, and that's what makes them horrifying. Mr. Corgi is not horrifying. He's portrayed as a sad, unfulfilled loser who's unhappy in his marriage, which, by the way, includes a wife and a child. The biggest problem with his character is that he's barely portrayed as a predator at all. He doesn't groom Waldo, he doesn't manipulate her, he doesn't build trust or slowly blur boundaries. Instead, Waldo initiates everything. He resists a bit, then just goes with the flow. And what's worse, later in the book it might feel like Mr. Corgi actually cares about Waldo, taking her on dates, risking his marriage, eventually admitting his love. The author presents him as a lost, pathetic man, rather than what he actually is. But that's not how it works in real life. Predators don't love, they lust. This represents a subsection of half-his-age haters I like to call the cops. Reviewers who are unable to engage with certain topics if they don't see the neon sign that tells them, yes, sexual abuse is bad, at all times. The thing that's missed here is that Jennette didn't want to tell a story about how Corgi is a predator or how evil Corgi gets his just desserts in the end. She wanted to tell a story about Waldo and the strange, sad parts of her that make her want her teacher and her hard-to-untangle feelings of love and shame and anger. The book is not a public service announcement telling us that Corgi is a maniacal, monsterized sex pest, but it doesn't remotely imply that Corgi is morally nuanced. Yes, Waldo pursues Corgi, but his initial slight resistance and then rapid acquiescence is the perfect illustration of the small, ego-preserving gestures that can, in the mind of a person like Corgi, maintain some semblance of innocence for him. Through this, Waldo's apparent power of seduction affection is revealed to be flimsy in the face of the power imbalance plaguing a teacher-student relationship. Even though she is the instigator, the book shows us she's still the victim of an authority figure who knows he should stop it.
He's still 40.
Only because she does take such an active role, she can also enjoy heightened feelings of shame about it. And through that we can access maybe the single biggest issue preventing abused and exploited girls from seeking help, the great shame and isolation they feel.
If Mr. Corgi had made the first move, what would be different about that story?
I think it would be an easier story. I think it would be one where you can label judgment a lot quicker, and you can write off both Corgi and Waldo in a sense. And you can kind of instantly put them into these boxes and go, okay, I know what this story is. I know what this is going to be. You know, I think you could close the book at that point, to be honest.
TikTok user Reads JP didn't like the book because she thought it had pick-me vibes.
There are 2 words I would use to summarise this whole book, and it is pick me. Pick me, please.
This seems an odd thing to say, considering the entire plot of the book is indeed about a girl desperately clawing for a man. Like, the entire thing is about how uncontrollably desperate she is, how deeply she cares about what other people think. What the hell else would she be that would make sense in this plot? She doesn't like her one female friend because she's Mormon and seemingly judgy, and she can't talk to her mother because she is herself too dependent on men to be present with Waldo emotionally. Like, her mother is categorically a pick-me. She's obsessed with her crappy boyfriends. And that is a sort of model that Waldo steps into a little bit. That's the book. That's what happens in the book. What are we talking about?
It's about a girl that's really thirsty for like male attention of her teacher who's not really that interested.
Did we read the same book? Because I thought Corgi was pretty interested. It's so much at the heart of the book that what Waldo craves in this relationship and her life in general, escape and ultimately control, is not coming to her through this avenue, that to dismiss the character as a pick-me feels like a total refusal to engage with the book and its characters. Jennette talked to Alex of Call Her Daddy about her interest in exploring desire versus power.
You know, I'm really interested in themes of desire and power and the things that we desire being confused with some form of power. When I was younger, I really confused sexuality with power. When I first started developing and first started feeling, attractive to men and started getting that kind of attention, I really believed that was power. And I really believe now, as a 33-year-old, it is not.
And it's this and all the misguided, selfish insanity of Waldo's uninhibited and thoughtless pursuit of her own desires that is at the center of this story. The book is about the deflation that comes after successfully attaining the picked status.
I assume a lot of women will feel really angry reading this, whether they've been in a significant age gap relationship or just any kind of relationship where they haven't really had their needs met, where they've really clawed or embarrassed themselves to attempt to have their needs met. I think, unfortunately, so many of us can relate.
That's why we see neither a bust-up or ongoing relationship with his wife. He just leaves her to be with Waldo. We see no wifely reaction, no community reaction, and so Waldo can have that uncomfortable, gradual, steady realization that what she's attained here is not satisfying. It's not worth anything. It cannot be a story about a neat, nice girl or a creepy predator getting his comeuppance, because the creep of guilt and shame and the wild oscillating feelings and the anticlimactic petering out of the relationship and the ugly, rageful, hungry sexuality mixing together into a hormonal sludge so intense it burns and then so boring that it fades into a pathetic memory, sure to stay a hard little pebble in Waldo's heart. That's what it's all about. It's the mess of it all, mentally, societally, vaginally, etc. Plus, she's so much more rageful than Meredith Grey.
You say Meredith and I yell, remember? Yeah. So pick me. Choose me. Love me.
The desperation of it all is couched here in disdain and disgust and anger, which makes for its own sort of catharsis, you know? She hates that man. The book ends with Waldo abandoning Corgi. Ping, they're on Group D and they might start checking bags soon. Where you at? I go to reply to tell him I'll be there in a sec, but my body won't let me. It's frozen. I try to override it, to shove my body's instincts down, tell them to be more quiet, be more right-sized, be more appropriate and more reasonable and less of a nuisance, only I can't. And beyond that, I don't want to. I leave the restroom, rolling my suitcase behind me, and I walk in the opposite direction of the gate, toward the exit to the airport. I walk past restaurants and candy shops, perfume stores and clothing boutiques, and I don't look at anything. I walk past it all. It's an end that feels sudden and oddly bittersweet. We don't see the aftermath, and we don't know what's next for Waldo. But I like the simplicity of it, the quietness of it. There's no big reaction, no discovery of the scandal. The relationship just ends without a word, and that's that. It's a relief for Waldo, but we're left with the ordeal that got her here, looming large in the background as she speeds away. It feels small and sad and weird, and I like that. Real Beef, commenting on this TikToker's review of the book, she doesn't like that it's set in Alaska because it doesn't exude enough primo Alaskan swag.
The setting is criminally underdeveloped. We're told we're in Alaska, which could be cool, but there's no real sense of place anywhere in the novel. We could be anywhere.
Did not agree. I physically read myself, and I felt the same as you did. I honestly finished it and was like, that's it? Where's the part where all the characters face the music for their actions? For some readers, there is only one question. When will Corgi be flogged? Emerald Fennell glazing section. So maybe half his age has a disappointing conclusion. Criticisms of this ending remind me a bit of popular criticisms of Promising Young Woman's ending. In this movie, Cassie, the friend of a dead rape victim who dedicates her life to seeking some form of justice, dies in her quest for that justice. But it turns out that she had an elaborate plan, meaning that her death could bring the police in. Here they come. Yay! For many people, this was a huge disappointment. People liked the first half of the movie where we watch her carry out dastardly plans to get people to care about rape for a second.
We have to give these boys the benefit of the doubt. That's why I know you won't mind, but 3 hours ago I picked your daughter Amber up from school and introduced her to the boys who live in that room now. What?
Or really just to punish them, lash out at them. But here the fun, cathartic revenge plot becomes something else. A weird, warped wind state in which she gets a deflated, non-visceral version of revenge that costs her life. If you're expecting a satisfying, punch-the-air ending where we reach a vengeful crescendo and solve the problem of sexual violence in the here and now of the movie, if not in real life forever, then you're inevitably going to be disappointed. But to me, what's interesting about these endings, both of them, is that they don't do that. They don't wrap everything up and give the audience that relief. Rather, they communicate a stark acknowledgement that these characters are not able to cleanly fix their lives. There is no real justice for them. Is Cassie getting revenge and cutting these people down to size, or is she just desperately trying to transfer the well of pain inside her to those who fail to have compassion, who move forward indifferently while she stays stuck? To quote Alison Wilmore's incredible review of the film for Vulture, righteousness is cold comfort when you're dead. Waldo is able to literally escape, unlike Cassie, but still, both endings communicate a sort of low sense of closure, with a lingering wrongness. In both stories, the protagonist's unstoppable obsession with fixing something unwieldy in their lives, for Cassie the rape problem on campus, and for Waldo the uncontrollable half-relationship in which she's powerless, is a destructive force. In Promising Young Woman, yes, we get a sort of half-baked moment of justice because Cassie's weird plan gets the police to get these guys, but this doesn't really do anything. Her friend cannot be brought back to life, and neither can she.
She doesn't actually do anything. That's the thing that's so fascinating. She's sort of deliberately inert.
We're led to believe throughout the film that her arc is about her revenge plot, about her finally getting some justice, but the ending subverts that by killing her lamely. It's bold, and it hurts. Even with some semblance of closure, her only release from the tyranny of sexual violence that has invaded her life is death. It is a shocking, sudden, uncomfortable end, to the point that it feels farcical and surreal. Why the hell does she die? Was the reaction from many. I don't want that. But to me, there's something honest in that about how unreal and stupid death can feel. Rape revenge plots can be cathartic and delicious, and attaining some sort of legal reckoning played straight might be satisfying, but here it's part of the deep disappointment of the narrative.
She's called Cassandra as a kind of nod to the sort of original Cassandra. All she's doing is saying no. And it's so hard. And so the whole purpose of the movie is to say, look how hard it is to say no.
Yes, her success in getting the police there is her catharsis, her ultimate goal, and in a way, her happy ending. But just as we can see in Whiplash that this happy little drummer boy is going to suffer and be marked by cruelty in the pursuit of excellence for life, we can see here that, she and her friend are dead. After all of that revenge, there is no recourse. The violence and its finality cannot be undone. I think I just always like a story that ends with everything's actually fucked up, dude. Similarly, Half His Age's ending shows us Waldo speeding away from the major nastinesses of her life with no final reckoning for Corgi, no assessment or neat condemnation of him, no fixing of these lives, which now just have this sordid thing in them for good. I like the sense of open-ended freedom that comes from Waldo just running away from her relationship, just abandoning the guy with no confrontation. It's a nice way of using the ever-present loneliness of her experience to her advantage and expressing her continued naivete. She can, no she must, just fuck off. There's a muted catharsis in her leaving, but there is no cleansing of the visceral, ugly experiences that precede this flight. There is no mother she's going home to. She's out there alone, finally an adult. It is a joyous yet fraught moment. The world is rotten, and to an extent, so is she. Looking at common criticisms of Half His Age, that it's overly and gratuitously sexual, that Waldo is unlikable, that Corgi isn't judged enough, and so on, I think Half His Age is, in its own way, a bit of a challenging book. It certainly gets at some of our thought-stopping societal discomforts. The idea that a teenager might genuinely desire sex with her teacher is a hard idea to engage with, partly because of just how much child sexuality has been weaponized by prosecutors in sexual assault cases.
A state judge in Dallas is facing criticism after sentencing a high school rapist to 45 days in jail and 250 hours of probation, and implying that the girl who was sexually assaulted was promiscuous. Sir Young, who was 18 at that time, admits he sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl that he knew. State District Judge Janine Howard told the Dallas Morning News that the victim wasn't the victim she claimed to be.
Many of us like to point to the law as our line when understanding the simple morality of stuff like this, but especially at the cusp between childhood and adulthood, the legal age of consent is an imperfect metric and exists within a contentious judicial system that does little to address sexual crimes. Is a relationship suddenly beyond the scope of criticism when its child is 18? No. Of course not. Half His Age is playing with the public's deference to the legal definition of a minor in America, as well as the expectations we have for victims. Waldo's treatment by Corgi doesn't feel any less severe because she's presented to us as bursting with hunger, nor because she becomes a legal adult no longer attending school over the course of the book. And through this we are confronted with the messy, uncomfortable vulnerabilities that cause Waldo to participate in her own exploitation. It looks past predators, painting a very real image of Corgi as a boring loser who has warped, needy feelings himself, and gazes directly into the ugly, aggrieved heart of a deeply lonely girl. Despite all of her foibles, her smug view of others, her simplistic insights into the male psyche, her insatiable angry lust, and all of her unfettered nastiness, she deserves better. The anticlimactic, bittersweet sigh of relief we get at the end of the book, knowing she's at the start of a long road ahead of her, is, I think, a wonderful way to convey the shaky release of pressure that can come from finally relinquishing your useless, destructive need for a man's approval and attention, and making a decision of self-preservation and real control. Waldo has just broken the seal on self-worth. She's free, but now she has to learn to live with real freedom. It's a raw, repulsive, sad little book, and I love it. The ending has been uneventful, petering out with almost no noise at all. Maybe that's how you know it's really an ending.